maybe. Okay. The purpose is to encourage parents to engage in activities with their child that promote child development by December 2021 by providing the positive parenting practices along with the Learn the Signs Act Early handouts. We will increase the average development promotion activity score by 10% across all families, as measured by our monthly report on the developmental promotion questionnaire. And we do have a means or our baseline score now, which is 3.7. Our weekly outcome measures the number of times each week that parents are participating in each of the 6 activities on the positive parenting practices handout. Our process measures the number of families that receive positive parenting practices handout. Other Learn the Signs Act Early handouts, which we have decided on, and I think I've put that down a little bit lower. And then finding out from the families if they received it and if they read it. And then once again, our pre-post survey of the Learn the Signs Act Early monitoring measures. So we do have our baseline score now, and it'll be almost time to collect our second score. Our disruptor measures, parents do not use the provided materials or they do not do any of the suggested activities. Our prediction is that we predict by providing parents with the positive parenting practices handout, the number of activities that parents do with their children will increase because these activities are designed to promote child development. The development of the child will improve. So the task and tools, all families now have received the color copies of the positive parenting practices, which we've laminated, gave each family a laminated copy. We also printed the copies of the learning collaborative surveys along with the PDSA surveys from ETO to take to the visits for the families to fill out. We are now in the process of giving each family the flyer from the CDC, the Milestone Tracker app flyer, and then we are encouraging them to download that app and helping them use it. And then also we are starting to hand out the books that came, and so depending on the child's age, each book has developmental milestones. A couple of them have charts in the back. And then I think the one that is just for the 1-year-olds, they don't have a chart in the back, but it talks about going to CDC's website. And so, like I said, depending on the age of the child, we give them the age appropriate book and explain to them how to utilize the book. Both of us are implementing the change with the clients and their children. We are providing the child development materials to the families to encourage them to engage in the suggested activities in order to promote the development of each child. We are doing this during home visits in the client's home. So we started by having each family fill out the child development learning collaborative survey, which will be done 3 times total. So we're getting ready to start with the second survey. And then we will assess the data. And as I mentioned earlier, our baseline score for that survey is 3.7. So based on what we were seeing, we decided to go ahead and try to encourage the families to download the app and to use CDC's website and we kind of show them, what all it involves and all the tips and activities that they provide on their website. Once again, we've provided each family with a laminated copy of the Positive Parenting Practices handout. We are encouraging the families to choose activities from each of the 6 categories. At each visit, we are having the family complete the Learning Collaborative PDSA so that we can document that in ETO. Once again, we have provided flyers to most of the families about the app and the website, and also provided the families with the age-appropriate book that includes milestones and tips. So that's basically where we're at right now. And any questions?
Wonderful. So you did receive the books, it sounds like, the ones we ordered.
Yes, we did. And they're, yes. So
good. Have you gotten any feedback from families about the books?
Not yet. We have, I don't think we've had any follow-up visits since we've handed the books, but we have given families a book. So we'll find out on our follow-up visit how they like the book, and so get some feedback then.
And it sounds like you're distributing a fair amount of different materials and you have the different parenting practices. Have you learned anything from the parents about maybe their favorite parts or favorite materials, things that they tend to gravitate towards?
Well, they like the Positive Parenting handout. I think all of them are like, oh, I'm going to put it on my refrigerator. And it's, they mentioned that it, when they're kind of stuck or what can we do, they can go to that handout and, help them find an activity, that, so they seem to like that because it's easy for them to access and simple activities that they can do with their child.
Great. Any other questions for Amy?
Hey, I don't have necessarily a question for Amy, although kudos, Amy. You're doing great. But so those books, I'm just starting to get those books, Helen, and I know that we have this conversation in the past. So I'm sorry, I just have to ask again. These ones are for both grants. I mean, I have MIECHV staff and I have OGAB staff, and they both are doing the CQI. So I'm good giving them to both.
Yeah, as long as it falls under the CQI, it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
And in terms of when you want to distribute them, programs are welcome to distribute them now as part of their ongoing PDSA, or if you wanted to make it an explicit part of your next round, you could hold off and incorporate it into the next PDSA round that we do starting in January. We actually were able to get the books a little faster than we had initially anticipated. So if you did want to hold off and use that as one of the main things you do next time, you could do that as well. It's up to you.
All right, thank you.
What I did, I don't know. I know, Marisol, it's kind of hard when you have, both and then you can't do for one. So what I did is, because there were not that many books, it was 50 something that we got. I just gave those to the non-MIECHV families that did not receive any books. The other ones have received books. So anyways, I wasn't going to have enough for everybody. So the ones that distributed for MIECHV, those were the families. And this particular is for the CQI, it was only for OGAB.
Thank you, Patty. That's helpful. All right. We're going to switch now to CAP Tulsa, and I don't see, it doesn't look like Ariane's on, so I'm guessing, Carolyn, are you going to be presenting today?
Yes, I am. Ariane is out at another event today, and so I am going to present in her stead. So I don't know that I have done this whole piece before, so if you'll be patient while I try to pull it up on the screen. I think I've got it here. Can everybody see that?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, great. And so very similar project that we are doing. I think it's something that families can really engage in and wrap their minds and hearts around with the positive parenting practices. And so we decided that for this fall season, we're really focusing on 3 of those, and it's the family meals, reading, and singing is where we're focused. And we're hoping that by using all of these materials and this focus that we're going to improve the LTS score from the very first measurement to the last measurement by 10% overall. So right now we're focusing on those 3. A lot of parent educators like to focus on 1 a month. So I think reading has been one that a lot have focused on first, then singing was the second one, and then family meals in November. And we have questions about how often they've done it, to a separate one. So how often do they have the meal time? How often do they read? And how often do they sing? We have used electronic handouts for the positive parenting handout, as well as the PAT handouts and introductory letter. And we have just gotten also the laminated refrigerator copies. And so we're doing a virtual Blockfest event this week where we're passing out materials, and we are passing out that laminated parenting practices handout to families so that they have a physical copy that they can use with a dry erase marker, so they can highlight and mark the activities that they are doing. So then we also have questions during the process measure about, did the PE discuss the yes or no, and then totaling the average, looking at main obstacles to performing each one and using those same obstacles for each one, the conflicting schedules or child unwilling, parent caregiver unwilling, family conflict, and so on. And then the tools needed is this. It took us a little longer to get that laminated and back than our intention. So that was a little bit of a slow up for us. But like I said, otherwise they've been just sharing it electronically and continuing to talk about it during visits. We also have it translated not just into Spanish, but also into Zomi, because we have a lot of Zomi speaking families. And so we're using it in all 3 of those languages. Then handouts that PAT handouts that correspond, like I said, PEs have been using a lot of the PAT handouts that focused on reading and books, especially in September, and then October, a lot of them were focusing on singing. We've used the welcome letter, and then the questions were added into ETO. And so the parent educators, as far as our plan, the parent educators were implementing the change, targeting all families, that were hoping for the frequency of families doing these activities to increase by 10%. They have started with an introduction of the PDSA, giving them first the electronic handout and now the laminated, encouraging them to do the different activities, and then following up to ask how often they are doing the different activities. And we'll be doing this until December. And then like I said, we've just been passing out the laminated copy with them to be marking on. We've been talking about the activities during the home visits and following up to ask what has been going on. And I think a couple neat things, I was getting some feedback from some of my parent educators, and I think one thing, as they've been able to focus on these different topics, is not even just the frequency, but also talking to families about kind of strategies they can use to implement these in their homes. And so, for example, we've been doing quite a bit around reading over the last year. And one parent educator was sharing with me how she was on every visit with her families last month, encouraging having the child read to the mom. And so showing how with 2, 3, and 4-year-olds that they would like to turn the pages and try to tell the story. And so kind of incorporating some new strategies of ways that parents can engage in an activity like that. And then another PE told me that she was noticing that when it came to the singing, that a lot of dads were very involved with singing, but as babies, but that she noticed the older the child got, that some of those habits had fallen away. And so she was discussing how she could try to encourage the parents to continue those singing practices up through the older ages. And she also mentioned that that she is from Venezuela, and many of her families were from Mexico. And so she was making it a goal to learn more songs and rhymes that might be more common for them. And so trying to learn what they did and have the parents share back. So anyway, I think that they've been using lots of different strategies to really engage families around these topics.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Andrew, I don't know if you have the data dashboard and you want to pull it up. I didn't do it for Bethany Public Schools because I know they were still working on getting some data on their end, and they're just now pulling in the data. But if you have anything for Cap Tulsa that you want to share, you can pull it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me share my screen. All right, so we've got two kind of odd pictures to show. So this first one, we're looking at the average responses when we ask parents, the very first time we ask parents about how often do they sing to the child, how often do they have meal times together, how often do you do story time activities, so read a story or tell a story or have the kid tell a story to you. And these two bars represent our average for everyone's first PDSA, so the first time we ask them these items, and the most recent measurement where we've asked items. And yeah, we're hoping to see an increase, and unfortunately, we're not seeing the increase we were hoping for. Looks like for most people, that second time or the second or third time we ask them, how many times do you perform these activities? Their most recent time seems to be a little lower than the average we're getting on the first time we're asking families this question. But this is we're comparing, this is within a person. So we're comparing someone's first measurement with their most recent measurement. We get a little different pattern if we look at that across time. So we're looking at what is the average on these items within a week. So this is just what is the average for every family for whom we have data that week. And each one of these lines represents the average for one of those three activities, either mealtime activities, singing, or storytime activities. And over time, those averages do seem to be going upwards, which is good news. It is hard to gel that with the last graph. It seems that their families who are who have that first PDSA instance later on in the cycle, just the first time we ask them, they seem to be giving higher scores. I'm not quite sure why that might be, or if I'm even interpreting that correctly. But I did want to bring it up. Carolyn, does this make sense to you? Do you have a guess as to what's happening here?
Yeah, I was looking at that earlier too, and I think what I'd like to do is bring it back to the team so that they can kind of see if that corresponds. I know that sometimes we have issues when we very first will roll out a question of getting lots of positive responses, and then over time maybe it comes out to being, if they're asked repeatedly, maybe they're a little bit of a more thoughtful response. But I would like to roll that out and see what they see, especially once we can pull in the November numbers too. I think it'll be helpful to see what direction that trajectory is going.
All right.
Andrew, this is David. I'm looking at this image for the first time, and forgive me, I may have missed some details there as you were running through it. Are these all reports from clients every week or every other week?
This is within a week on the PDSA touchpoint. So those are items that are asked. Well, the items are, how many days a week do you have a meal together? How many days a week do you sing together? And those are on the PDSA touchpoint, which Carolyn, you know this better than I. That's filled out at every other visit.
Yeah, I think they're doing it at least monthly and twice a month when possible.
Okay.
And is the question you had, Andrew, why are we seeing this up and down pattern?
Or it's why the average overall is increasing over time when we're seeing so over time we're seeing an increase, but within a person, it looks like a decrease. People always seem to give higher answers on their first measurement than on their second or third measurement.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I was going to recommend that you create a version of the line plot there that is at the individual level, because now it looks like it's the weekly sum across those activities. But you could have a line for each individual, right, and maybe an average for those individuals, and maybe this is just you know, the ecological fallacy here rearing its ugly head. The idea that when we aggregate across groups, especially when it's unbalanced samples at each time point, we can get a different trend than if we look at the individual over time.
All right, yeah, I can do that.
That's a helpful thought. Thank you.
Yeah, and that was the main point I wanted to bring up from the touch point. I do have graphs of
Yeah, and then I'll share that graph at our next staff meeting too, and just try and get feedback from the PEs who are asking and see if they see that as representative, or maybe if it is somehow that cumulative is not really reflecting the individual stories there.
all right. All right, so this graph I've brought up here, we're looking at, it's the same outcome, the average days per week that families have set within a week. But I've broken the families up into two different groups. Those for whom the parent educator discussed the positive parenting practices during the previous visit. And let's see, it looks like it was a little ways into the cycle before we're seeing individuals ready to say, yes, the PE discussed these visits or these practices last time. And see, I guess, a more sharp increase during this time frame, but they do seem to be the average. After that, the averages seem to be about the same between groups. So it looks like whether or not, unfortunately, it looks like whether or not we are discussing these activities from one visit to the next, the amount of time parents report these activities doesn't seem to change based on whether or not the parent educator asked about them in the previous visit. And this one is not going to be very helpful. These are the items about obstacles, asking, okay, what are the main obstacles for performing any given activities? And there's some internal logic on the touch point, such that parents will only ever answer these questions if they say they're performing that some practice 0 or 1 time a week. And most people rate themselves as doing these activities more often than that, so we don't have a lot of data in these items. So I'm not sure there's a whole lot to take from these items. They just aren't asked all that often.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Appreciate you walking us through the data. Any questions related to that project? Okay, so we're going to switch now to LCDA and have them. How do you look surprised? Did we not warn you?
I wasn't sure that we were going to have that. Okay, but I have it. Jimmy's just. Can you see it?
Yes, we can. It's yeah, perfect.
Ours is increased family involvement in child development. Again, the same dates that everyone has. we selected this because we thought that by encouraging parents to continue participating in the program and helping them downloading the milestones, the CDC app to monitor and track the children's milestones, they will engage in more age-appropriate activities, promoting the development of their children. Starting on the 23rd, or Smart Aim was the all families and PAT and safe care with children under the age of 5 will demonstrate 5% increase in the positive parenting behavior by December 31st. And that's done with the bi-monthly questionnaire. The predictions would be that parents will increase their knowledge about child development and will feel more confident discussing their children's development during the home visits. There will be more realistic expectations as well, and it will engage in more appropriate, age-appropriate activities. So the questionnaire was translated. This is the part that maybe some struggle, helping the families to download the CDC app. They did, it was taking a lot more time at the home visit. The PEs were saying, it's not just saying, let's just download it, but you have to really explain the app. So it's taking half an hour more just to go over this. And then you have your own plan of the activities and everything that you have for the home visit. And then they were a little frustrated because maybe they have downloaded the app, and then in the next visit that they will come and ask how they did. I was, oh no, we eliminated, it was using so much on my phone and my phone doesn't have that capability, that kind of thing. So that's created, it was created the drop down box in ETO indicating how many times during the last week they have used that milestones app or another, and then we have another touch point with the bi-monthly questionnaires. So all families in the program with children under 5, so basically everyone. We've done, I don't know, Monica, I don't know if they have a completed, though they are right now in November completing. The ones that did it in September, they had in October, or if they did it after, it's just every other month. We should have.
I will say, Patty, that 75% of the families have
At least
2
two?
PDSA
Okay.
completed.
That's what I thought. I don't know in Safe Care, Cynthia, if it's the same.
Yes, it's about the same.
It's about the same, yeah. So that's the piece that we're at. I don't know if Autumn wants to show the graphs.
And do you have the dashboard to show?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Patty, do you want to stop sharing? Yeah, perfect. And then I can pull up.
So we can start with Parents as Teachers of the 2 programs. Parents as Teachers certainly has a larger sample size. So what we're looking at here are week of administrations and just average number of positive parenting practices as assessed through the Learning Collaborative questionnaire. And then on the right, we kind of have first visit versus a third or however many counts of visitations they've had through the PDSA cycle. We're looking at their average positive parenting practices for that. So still pretty, we're still expecting more former visits to come in. But right now it looks like it's pretty flat. The 2 individuals, the 2 families that have had multiple visitations, looks like positive parenting practices are about the same for them. So this is kind of what's a little bit more interesting is for those, how do we track app engagement across these different families? And it looks like a lot of these participants are not engaging with the CDC app very frequently. That's kind of what these pink colors are indicating. So the majority of the responses across all these are indicating little to no CDC app usage. And then this is again illustrated for the percentages of app engagement within each week. We can look at, there are a lot more colors here again to look at. This is kind of looking at the domains of each positive parenting practice that we're assessing, trying to hope to draw out where, which positive parenting practices we can target to see the most change. And honestly, it looks like it's some of these more like art projects are receiving little endorsements, or sorry, less frequent endorsements. Park or hiking, play dates certainly are receiving less frequent endorsements. This is, to me, is pretty interesting because I think it shows where there is room to engage and hopefully encourage more frequent positive parenting practices. And then finally, we've looked at the activities that are being distributed, and it looks like a lot of these families are receiving activities. So, and this is especially true as you experience more visitations throughout the PDSA. This is parents as teachers, and then we also have the safe care. But for the safe care, it's kind of the participant pool is a little bit smaller, but I think it's a fairly similar narrative across these as well.
And this is David again, and same question, I guess, posed to Andrew, I would pose to you. What does it look like at the individual level over time? I mean, both or most of the graphics here looks that the x-axis is the timeline, right? It's not it's not repeat assessments other than I suppose your summary plots.
So that was what I highlighted. The first thing I highlighted here for those participants that have had multiple visits, the positive parenting practices are about the same. The average amount of positive parenting practices is pretty flat.
What do those bars represent?
That's average across visitation count. So the plots are individual families. The bars are average across all individual families.
Those lines across the graph, they're showing the dot where it was at the first visit and that where that same family shows up at the third visit, right? So they're just those two families.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's showing that that line's relatively flat for those two families.
Oh, I see. So at time 3 there really are only 2 families so far.
Right. So the average is higher, but that's just because those two families happen to be higher to begin with.
I see.
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of hard to figure out these graphs.
And in the other plots that you showed us, the ones with lots of color, we can presume then that most of that data, that's the first assessment from a family, even if it's happening on different dates.
Yes. Well, yeah, except for those 2 who have had 2 reports.
So when we're seeing lots of pink, it's suggesting that those families are doing those behaviors pretty much every single day. They're reporting doing them 7 days a week. So when we look at show affection, all families pretty much are saying they do that every single day. Whereas art projects, when we're seeing all those multitude of colors, it's because some families are saying we never do them. We do them once a day, 1 day, 2 days a week. So we're seeing more variation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Patty, in terms of these color visuals, that's kind of the takeaway is if you're seeing lots of pink, it's saying these families are saying they do it every day, all the time. But if you're seeing lots of different colors, it's suggesting that there's a range in how often families are doing this type of activity. So it looks like art projects, going to the park or hiking, arranging play dates, even reading stories. We're not seeing that as a daily, everything's pink. So it looks like there's more space to improve those behaviors and make them more frequent with families. All right, thank you so much, Adam, and thank you, Patty, for presenting.
Thank you.
All right, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to David, who's going to introduce our speaker today, and then we will have our special presentation. So, David, feel free to take it away.
Thanks, Helen. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce a dear colleague today, and she's now on video, so you can see Farha Marfani is with us today from the Administration of Children and Families. She studied public health at Johns Hopkins University and has been a grants evaluator at ACF for several years. Most recently has been leading another CQI learning collaborative, this one also sponsored by MIECHV and working with tribal nations. I've been active in that same collaborative as a consultant. We've talked about that as a group on a few past occasions, and I thought it would be wonderful to have her join us today and tell you even more about all of the exciting work that's being done within their learning collaborative. They have, I think I may have mentioned this before, they have been working on two separate topics simultaneously. I believe most sites choose only one of those pathways, and she's planning today to tell us about the early learning and language pathway that's being worked on, and give us some examples of PDSAs that have been started and have been finished, success stories, lessons learned, things that we think might be advantageous for us to know as we work on the existing PDSAs for developmental promotion and monitoring, but also thinking ahead to January when you build your second PDSA. We think there might be some nuggets of wisdom here and inspiration that we can borrow from that group. So without further ado, Farha, please take it away and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here and learn from you all and share with you all what we're learning in our collaborative. I'm actually seeing some similarities between what you guys are doing and what we're doing. And so I'm really happy to share about our work. Can we get the slides up, please? Thank you. So as David mentioned, my name is Farha Marfani and I'm with ACF, the Tribal Home Visiting Program. And so we're actually part of the broader MIECHV program, but we provide grants to tribal organizations to develop, implement, and evaluate home visiting programs in American Indian Alaska Native communities. Next slide, please. So here's just a quick agenda or overview of what I'm hoping to share today. So David did a great job of providing some intro, but I thought it'd be helpful to give you a little bit more context and give you an overview of our CQI collaboratives. I'll kind of walk through pretty quickly our key driver diagram, our family of measures, what we call our measurement strategy. I can talk through that a little bit. And then I do have some example change ideas that I can share with you as well. I will say that I wasn't able to get permission from everybody that I reached out to share. So I'm going to keep it pretty high level, but I'm happy to follow up later with Helen and David if you would like some more information. And then I thought we would have, if we have time for questions and discussion, I'm happy to answer any questions. Next slide, please. CQI has been a priority for tribal home visiting for many years since the program started up in 2011. And our grantees are trained in the foundations of CQI pretty early on in the implementation of their home visiting programs. And so the CQI collaboratives are actually really new to tribal home visiting. We just started up, I will say last year, took a pause for COVID and then came back and relaunched earlier this year. I'm sure you all can relate. So we're actually kind of deep into it right now. And really the idea is to bring our grantees together in collaborative improvement projects like you guys are doing, and really provide this chance for them to share and learn from each other. So our grantees conduct individual rapid cycle PDSA projects like what you all are doing and are in a collaborative with other grantees like David mentioned. And we do have 2 that we're running right now. David is special faculty on the Family Engagement Collaborative, and then we have the Early Language and Literacy Collaborative, which I will talk about today. And grantees are required to be involved in the collaborative as well, which I understand is the case for you all too. And these topics, I will say, we polled our grantees about topics, and they chose these 2 because they really hold importance to tribal home visiting programs, and teams really are focusing on advancing improvement in these areas kind of overall for their programs and with the families that they serve. Next slide, please. So I'd love to kind of just share pictures of our programs and our families and really drive home the point that the CQI collaboratives really harness the strengths and expertise of tribal home visiting programs. And we're bringing them together, like I said, for a broader improvement project around, topics that they could kind of rally around. And we gathered input from our tribal home visiting programs and other kind of experts and those in the field to ensure that the collaboratives would be useful, relevant, and that its activities would be manageable for grantee teams. Next slide, please. So this is a mantra that we commonly come back to in our collaborative. And I feel like when we say this, it really resonates with our grantee teams. So think big, start small. The CQI collaboratives really support the notion of thinking big and ensuring kind of this breakthrough improvement in our aim. And the idea is to start small and make really small granular changes to existing program processes through rapid PDSA cycles. And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys really showed through your reports how you guys are doing this as well. But this is something that we have heard that grantee teams really find useful. And as you'll see in some of the examples that I'll share, there are some pretty big, visions or priorities that grantees are really leveraging the CQIC framework and the method for. And so one example, which I'll share later, is around language revitalization. So a lot of language and culture and customs have been disrupted in tribal communities through colonization, through historical trauma. And it's really been powerful to see this framework being used and starting small with like one home visitor, one family, but really kind of towards a bigger vision and mission for a program and for a community. So it's been really exciting to see that kind of that activity that leads to something bigger and beyond kind of all of us. Next slide, please. So similar to how you guys have like a key driver diagram or the materials like your PDSA planning tool, we also created a topic toolkit. We're calling that we use that to call, to reference these materials that we've created for our collaborative and really support grantees in the collaborative experience. And these materials really build on and work together. And it's really helpful to have these to support grantees as they think big, but they're starting small. So you'll see the PDSA planning tool is on here as well. It looks very similar to what you guys have shared and what you all use. And I'll walk through a little bit of this in the next 2 slides. Next slide, please. So this is our key driver diagram. And as you are aware, this is a visual display of the primary and secondary drivers that really contribute to the collaborative aim. And this tool helps our teams identify where to focus their tests of change. And what's not shown here, and I think is what you guys, I think, have in your key driver diagram, are change ideas. And so we do have that as part of a resource library that we have for our collaborative teams, but there wasn't clearly enough space to put it on this key driver diagram. But this kind of gives grantee teams a bigger picture and really helps them identify, what drivers they can focus on through a change idea. So I'll walk through a little bit of this, and I think you'll see a lot of similarities with what you're doing already. in some of the primary drivers and secondary drivers. So next slide, please. Okay, so primary driver 1 for the EL&L collaborative starts at the home visitor level. So home visitors have knowledge and skills to support families to promote EL&L development with their children. And you'll see 3 secondary drivers below, and they all focus on, again, those knowledge and skills, right? So you have 1 secondary driver that focuses on parent-child interaction and EL&L development. And you have 1 driver that focuses on culture and native language. That's really important to a lot of our tribal grantees. And then you have a driver that's focused on knowledge and skills to really help families do activities that support parent-child interaction. So you'll see like that they're related, but a little bit different in terms of what grantee teams could focus on in this first primary driver bucket. Next slide, please. And then primary driver 2 is that the home visitors have the support and the resources necessary to support families to promote EL&L development with their children. So that first driver was focused on the knowledge and the skills, and now we're focusing in on support and the resources. So this could mean, they have resources such as strategies to identify existing family strengths and to engage families in activities that promote EL&L. And then there's also a driver around professional development and supervision and observation of the home visitors themselves, that, this parallel process and that you guys are very well aware of, that then help the families promote EL&L with their children. Next slide, please. Our primary driver 3 is that the families have knowledge, skills, and resources to promote EL&L development with their children. There's 5 secondary drivers here. I won't go through all of them, but they all really relate to the home visitors equipping families with resources that can then help them with their children. So you'll see an example like, and some of this will come through in the examples that I'll share, but home visitors giving families culturally relevant resources, really helping them hone in on parent-child interaction activities, providing them with education on why it's important to focus on EL&L development, helping them identify their own children's strengths, helping them assess their children's development through things like the ASQ, providing books, kind of like what some of you guys mentioned, to the families as well. Next slide, please. And the last driver that we also have is the overall home visiting program and community, making sure that they have resources to support families to promote EL&L development with their children. And so the 2 drivers that we have here, secondary drivers, are making sure that there's relationships with key partners and resources in the community, and then also connecting families with those partners and resources. So again, related, but a little bit distinct in terms of how community partners can really help families through the home visiting program. Next slide, please. So our SMART aim, actually, I think is very similar to what you guys are doing. So we have a SMART aim that by April of next year, we will increase the % of children enrolled in home visiting with a caregiver who reported that during a typical week, the caregiver or family member read, told stories, or sang songs with their children every day. And this is actually aligned with one of our performance measures. So some grantee teams do report this on a regular basis for their annual performance reporting. So it made sense for us to kind of build on that existing data collection already for those teams who are using this on the performance measures. Next slide, please. And so we also have additional family of measures, what we call our measurement strategy, that really relate to some of our drivers. So we also ask on a monthly basis monthly or quarterly basis for our grantee teams to submit data on the number of trainings, communities of practice, or peer sharing opportunities that they might have attended, that the home visitors might have attended, that relate to some of these topics. The % of supervision sessions where EL&L content was discussed, the percent of home visits where ELNL content was discussed. And then we have this measure about, how many caregivers in the program were actually asked whether or not they do these activities that our SMART aim relates to. Do they read, tell stories, or sing songs with their children every day? And then finally, the number of interactions that a home visiting program has with community partners specializing in ELNL. So, a lot of libraries, lending libraries, other programs that support ELNL in the community. Does the home visiting program have some kind of connection with those partners and resources? Next slide. So now I'll talk through a little bit of, I'll give you a flavor of some of the things that our grantee teams are doing. And what we do in our monthly calls is we share some of these examples from the past month to kind of give folks an idea of what everybody else is doing, very similar to what you guys have just shared. And we kind of organize them by primary driver. And then we kind of also show how many teams focused in on the primary driver. So we can kind of try to get an understanding of a pattern and then connect grantee teams as needed if, there are a lot of programs who are focusing in on a primary driver. There definitely could be a connection there or an opportunity for them to share or learn further. So here's an example from primary driver 1. The home visitors have knowledge and skills to support families to promote ELNL development of their children. So we have one team who actually is working on, I think I mentioned, language revitalization. So they're putting together a training guide and a vocabulary list on native language and really training their home visitors around how to use this guide so that they can then take the languages or the words that they learn and share those with families in their home visits. And so this particular team has been doing this for a while, and they've just started their 6th cycle in this ramp. So they've kind of built this, they've built their cycles over time. And then in September, they were working on their 6th cycle in this ramp. So they started off with 1 home visitor, training them, and then I think have moved on to training more home visitors with this new guide. And this is a team that's actually mentioned that they wanted to do this for a long time and just couldn't find the time or the space to do it. But that this, the CQIC kind of opportunity and the framework and the method of just trying things out has really helped them kind of, work towards this broader vision of bringing these languages to their families. Next slide. So this is primary driver 3. So families have knowledge, skills, and resources to promote ELNL development with their children. So that first team that I just shared was thinking about how to equip or train their home visitors to learn their native language, that they could then share that with their families. So this team has actually worked on this for a while too. And they reached out to several clients to see if they were interested in a native language goal setting activity. And one home visitor, followed up with a client who had completed the goal setting activity to see how her experience was going. So she was interested in learning some native words and then put together some goals for her and her son to complete together. And the home visitor was obviously supporting this entire process. And so the home visitors, they found success on this plan, and several clients wanted to do this as well. So they tried it with, a few more home visitors and a few more families. You'll see here that one client was a no-show. That happens. Another client who did this activity reported that she was achieving her goal of practicing her language 2 days a week with her son. So they're, again, adapting and making tweaks and testing again, and are kind of on this ramp as well of this change idea. So kind of related, but a little different in terms of that first team who was also doing something related to language revitalization. Next slide, please. So here, so I did actually get permission from this team. So this is the Strong Families Home Visiting Program at the American Health Center in Oakland, California. And so here's an example of a presentation that they put together. And I thought visually did a really good job of showing what they did with their family. So they had these monthly goals that they put together for a family. which I just mentioned about, just practicing 2 words a week with your child. Another goal that the family wanted to do was, start learning a traditional song from her relative. So those were the goals that they put in place, collaboratively. And then the home visitor, provided kind of like a framework, helped look up some resources. She found some words in the native language, mother and child, and then found some YouTube videos, some Instagram resources, and even a self-paced course. So the home visitor really kind of sparked this for her, but also gave her kind of the flexibility to choose things that worked for her. So I think what was really beautiful about this example was that going back to this like philosophy of like think big, start small, right? So it could be a little overwhelming for a mother to say, I want to learn this language, I want to bring it back to my family. They found like kind of like bite-sized resources that were in line with like this bite-sized idea of like starting up very small, but towards a bigger aim and vision. And actually the name of this project, they've called it the Indigenous Language Project, bringing our languages home. So I thought it was just a really beautiful kind of vision that they had, and they've been doing really well and have, like I shared, taking small steps to kind of allow all families in their program to really experience this as well. Next slide, please. So here's another change idea. I think this is the last one that I'll share today. And I think this might be really relevant to what some of you guys are doing currently around developmental screening and promotion. So our primary driver 3, again, about making sure families have knowledge, skills, and resources to promote ELL development with their children. So this team actually wanted to figure out a way to introduce the Ages and Stages questionnaire screening. Introduce that, and like they have some visits where they do these ASQ screenings consistently with families, and they really wanted to make sure the home visitors were confident and prepared to really have this conversation and discussion with their families. And they also realized that there might be some fears that families have about if their child is developmentally delayed. So it was kind of like a bigger idea to kind of improve their program policies and procedures overall, but they knew what they had to work on. And so again, the CQIC method, and then being in this collaborative with others, focus on this topic, I think really helped them work on this for their program. And so you'll see their improvement theory here, which is if we include cultural messaging and enhancements in the ASQ script to introduce ASQ visits, then home visitors will feel confident about communicating what will happen in their visits, and they'll feel more prepared to introduce the ASQ visits in English and the native language. So this program actually does incorporate some cultural lessons and some native language when they can into their visits and into their curriculums. This was in line with their kind of broader kind of program in terms of making sure the native language was considered as well. So they did a lot of work kind of tweaking the ASQ script. They tried it out with one home visitor, and they also have a cultural advisor that they really got input from. And then after they kind of came to some agreement, tried it out, tested it again with another home visitor, they were able to get fully trained from their cultural advisor about this kind of this new ASQ screening protocol, and then make that part of their overall program policy. And so I feel like I shared some handouts, I think before this call, or maybe Lisa has shared those with you. So 2 handouts that I shared are somewhat related to this, and I thought you might find it interesting and helpful. So the Tribal Early Childhood Research Center, which is one of our collaborators, so it's not our program, but we do collaborate with them, has put together 2 handouts about supporting your child through developmental screening from birth to age 5. And so what they did is that they visited urban, rural, and reservation American Indian Alaska Native communities, and they talked with families about developmental screening. And so the information that's in these two handouts, one is for families and one is for providers, comes from their visits and comes from what they learned. So we have we keep tools like this in our change package, so that when grantee teams are interested in carrying out an idea and they just don't know where to start, or they want a resource, they can go to our change package and they can, find a resource that matches a change idea. And then they can use that, as a change idea potentially, or test it out like a flyer or a resource, or just a new idea of any kind. And so this reminded me to share this with you all, because even though this team didn't use this particular resource, I feel like they've kind of inspired others to think about this as well. So it's a really nice feature of the collaborative environment that you just kind of, I think you guys use this term too, steal shamelessly or share broadly, and I'm butchering that, but I think you get the idea. Really, that the resources are there for everybody to benefit from. So I wanted to share that with you all as well. Next slide. And so just overall reflections thus far. And so we're kind of still in this and we're still learning, but I can share what we've learned so far and what grantee teams have shared with us, is that the CQICs have really given them the knowledge and help them identify strategies on integrating ELNL into home visits. They've given them, the experience has given them increased opportunities for team discussion and input. So a lot of our teams do have CQI meetings, or they make time in existing team meetings to talk about CQI. So that has been really helpful, that, on a monthly basis, they're doing this because they kind of have to for the CQI collaboratives. But I think, as I mentioned, it's kind of helping facilitate some bigger conversations they wanted to have anyway. We're definitely seeing an increase in using ELN activities in home visits. And I don't have the data to share today, but I can probably follow up with David and Helen if you guys are interested. And then they've also talked about how it's really helped them plan for some more cultural and native language integration into their ELNL activities. So it's just been a real honor kind of leading this work on behalf of our program, and really learning so much from our grantees, who continue to inspire us every day, really. And I think this collaborative experience has just proven that they're just so much, I think when given the opportunity and the space, there's so much that can be done, and this collaborative has really shown that for us. So I think that's all I have. I have no idea how I am in terms of time. So if we don't have time for questions or reflections, completely understand. But if there are any pressing questions, I'm happy to take those if we do have time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. And we do have some time, so I want to open it up if people have questions, comments, thoughts after that presentation.
Okay, I'm not hearing anything yet, so I'm gonna get the ball rolling here. I have a question for you, Farha. So I know you don't have data prepared just yet for the entire collaborative, but maybe any advice you have or observations you've made about collection of data around ELNL that we ought to know. Are you seeing, I'm thinking about the PDSA reviews that you got a chance to witness there at the beginning of today's call. Any advice to share about how to collect data at the individual level versus the program level? And
yeah, actually, I was really impressed, and I kind of wanted to ask you guys about your data dashboard, because it's so fancy compared to what we do. We just have like our Excel sheets, and we kind of make graphs, we put them on PowerPoints. But I was really interested to hear more about your nifty data dashboards there. But I guess in terms of our data collection, I think what we've learned is that it's a process along the way, right? So there are some teams who realized they weren't even asking about ELNL on home visits, so they weren't asking about ELNL supervision sessions. So they had to kind of go back and figure out where they could find opportunities to integrate that anyhow. So how would you collect data on whether or not your supervisor is talking to you about ELNL with your families if you don't have it there? So some of them had to go back and kind of update their data systems or their forms And just by having that extra question or data point, they realized that they weren't doing it, or they actually were doing it and it just wasn't being tracked in that way. So I think that realization has been really helpful for our teams, because sometimes, and I think you guys can attest, you really underestimate how much you actually do in your programs and with your families. And so by having the extra data point there, I think it really shows, like, how much more you actually are doing than just not seeing, because the data is not capturing it. So I think that's one thing that I think over time we've learned, as you make tweaks in your program around some of these change ideas, even making those tweaks in your data collection protocols is obviously going to be helpful too. So that's one thing that I can probably share in terms of a reflection that our grantee teams have shared about their data collection.
Thank you. And you're right. It is remarkable, the work that's already being done, and sometimes not spotlighted until we have to make concerted effort to put together a PDSA and think about what are we going to measure. I had that same realization. I was just telling Helen a few hours ago, we had a meeting to talk about upcoming evaluations that potentially could be sponsored with some additional MIECHV monies. And we were looking closer at some of the content in the home visiting database that all of these programs utilize around goal setting and goal monitoring. That sounds familiar, right, Farhouse? So this is the other PDSA topic that the Tribal Collaborative is tackling, and that I'm consulting on, and Farha is helping direct. But I was blown away again with the realization of all of the great information that the providers of your programs are collecting, particularly on that topic. And it's one that we're keenly interested in, and think maybe, well, we don't think, we're fairly certain at this stage that it's heavily affecting our engagement with families long-term. So it's something we'd like to explore more closely. How does goal setting and goal accomplishment impact sustainment of family engagement and services?
Yeah, and I think goal setting, you're right that we're focusing on that for the other collaborative more explicitly, because that's part of our aim. But we've seen goal setting come up a lot in this collaborative too. And I think it just speaks to letting families take the lead too, which I think is just so important, especially in this work, if it's with language specifically and culture. That's really personal and special to a family. So letting them kind of take the lead as to what they want to focus on, I think has really helped our programs and our home visitors. And really, they've taken the lead from their families and crafted the PDSAs based on what they're hearing from their families as well. So I feel like that is another kind of, I think, best practice overall. But again, I think this collaborative experience has kind of spotlighted that for us too, or really made that point more powerful.
I had a question. One comment that comes up with some of the different programs is that the providers and the families sometimes are coming from different cultural backgrounds and different backgrounds in terms of language. And so how to help the provider support the family around their own culture and their own language if sometimes those aren't aligned. And I just wondered if you had any suggestions, if your providers run into that or your programs have talked about how to support the culture and language of a family when it doesn't match up with the provider, and sometimes can create some barriers and challenges.
Yeah, and so I think the example that I just shared about the Indigenous Language Project, so even though the home visitor themselves was Native, they didn't speak the language that family was hoping to learn. So I think it was just being there as a support and using this like idea of, okay, let's start small, and what resources can you find on your own, I think was really helpful for that particular family and that home visitor. So I think there's so many resources that you can leverage that are out there on, like she went to YouTube and Instagram with the home visitor's help and was just finding things, and really the home visitor was there to kind of rein her in a little bit and say, if all these resources, but find something that really resonates with you and find something that fits within this, like this goal that you've set of like 2 words a day or something, or 2 words a week. So that YouTube video, I think that they found was like 2 or 3 words that they were able to practice. So I think having the home visitor, even though their language or their culture might not match up, but just kind of being a sounding board or just being a resource to kind of have that family just like come to for just ideas. I think they found that really helpful, that team. And I think just this collaborative too, like I think the calls that we have similar to yours are good chances for the home visitors and the program to just talk amongst each other and share additional resources that might not already exist, or get some advice or input. We're constantly connecting people with one another. And I think the collaborative does that on a more natural basis. But if you want to reach out to somebody else who has more in-depth knowledge, like we're definitely able to do that or facilitate that connection. So I think we really support the notion of just like, connecting people who come from different backgrounds and experiences. Because I feel like that's one thing, I feel like we all have something to offer. And I think the collaborative really has shown that to us as well. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, thoughts about the presentation?
You've given us a lot of good content to think about, Farha, especially with that PDSA, the second PDSA looming just around the holiday break here. So thank you for sharing. And yeah, it's sort of reassuring just to know that we're not alone. Even we've got 13 programs here that are sort of actively working on this idea, but there are others in very similar situations elsewhere doing the same thing. So motivating and inspiring to see others working in the same topic area and having success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was definitely a takeaway from me too from this call. So it's really great to see all the great work that you all are doing as well. And there's definitely similarities. So it's wonderful to see that. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. And just to wrap up the call, like we mentioned at the beginning, we will have some rounding calls this month. So Lisa will be sending those out. The plan is for OKCPS, Frontline, and Parent Promise to have rounding calls. And then we'll send out a list of programs that we expect to do progress reports this next time around. And we'll also have our monthly meeting towards the end of November. Hopefully we can get it in before the break. But if you don't have any more questions, we'll end a few minutes early, but I just want to give people a chance. Any last questions, comments, thoughts before we wrap up today? All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.